Uh, Good afternoon. I think it's probably afternoon for everybody at this point. Um, Thank you all for joining us. My name is Manny Leon. I'm Assistant Director with the Office of Early Academic Outreach, and I primarily work with Bill to oversee the MESA program here in Arizona. Former chair of the NEDC committee, and then Bill and I currently work with the NEDC committee, and I just had a great time working with the team and putting together both the competitions over the years and now this conference. So thank you for joining us today.
Right. And my name is Bill Pike. I am the coordinator for Arizona Mesa. So we're a mighty team of three. So like Manny said, it's Manny, myself, and then our executive director, Rudy. And what we wanted to do here is give you something that you can take back to your school, your state, whatever that happens to be, so that you can then start working with this idea of designing for equity. I know before I came into this role, I was a teacher here in Tucson, and one of the things that I got the most out of conferences was when I went to a conference and got something that I could use really quickly into my own classroom. And so I really come at it from that perspective as we're doing it. So what I want to talk about today is how taking this idea of designing for equity and putting it into a system that you can use. And I will share this presentation with everybody. At the conclusion, there'll be a link in the chat. And as we're moving through, this is going to be interactive. And so there'll be links put into the chat where, to go and take a look at something, and it will be your copy. All the links will be something that will force you to make a copy of it. So that is your own personal copy. So please feel free to do whatever it is you want to do with that. And nothing in here is set in stone. These are all guidelines because I am 100% respectful of the fact that every classroom and every club works differently. And so what you do may be different than what I used to do or what your neighbor might do. And so please feel free to modify and do whatever it is you need to do with this information and with these tools that I'm about to give you. Right. So this is designing for equity. And one of the things that we should do is first have some common definitions. So this is directly out of the NEDC specs. We are designing to minimize or eliminate barriers to opportunities of success, right? And we at MESA USA really want to bring equity to our students, and we really want them to be able to achieve their goals because talent is equally distributed across race and gender, but opportunity is not. And so we want to make sure that we are working towards equity for all of our students. And so to continue this idea, I clicked too soon. And if we look at MESA as a organization, this NEDC and the last NEDC was really about the idea of focusing on people. And so if we look at the design process from the previous NEDC, it was a human-centered design where we wanted students to empathize, wanted to define, ideate, prototype, and then test. But now, how does this work into this idea of designing for equity? Because we want our students to be able to say, what are we looking for? How are we going to define what it is, and then move forward? And so we have this human-centered design focus with this human-centered design process with an equity focus. It's 1 in the afternoon. So the first thing we want to do is notice, what are they seeing in their environment? What is going on around them? And then empathize, and then notice how the rest of these start to look a lot like the human-centered design process. And so something that we've done for the last 3 years is really now tying it in and making it more focused on the idea that we are focusing on equity. So these are things that we've been doing and really kind of started with the prosthetic arm and then has evolved from there. But these are things that if you've done MESA for even a couple of years, you already have a lot of exposure to. So we don't need to reinvent the wheel. We don't need to make wholesale changes. Really, we can take this and modify it a little bit so that it's stuff that we've already done in our classrooms and with our students to then be focused on this idea of we're designing for equity with the students to overcome those barriers. And so as we do this, we always want to make sure that we're starting with a common definition. So I have a quick video. It's only about 3 minutes and 45 seconds long to sort of define what that is. Oh, wait. There we go.
Today, we are talking about equity and equality. But you might be wondering, wait, aren't these the same thing? They look the same. They sound similar. So aren't they the same? No, in fact, they're really different concepts, even though a lot of us get the two confused. So let's break them down. You probably already know what we mean when we say equality. We're talking about two things that are the same or have a similar value. When we treat two people or two groups of people equally, we make sure that they have or get the same things. For example, if I want to give Betty some apples, then I need to give Ben the same number of apples to treat them with equality. Along the same lines, if I want to give the nursing program a budget increase, then I need to make sure that I give the culinary arts program the same budget increase to treat them with equality. That makes sense. But that's not the same thing as equity. Equity can be defined as giving everyone what they need to be successful. In other words, it's not giving everyone the exact same thing. And here's where the difference between equity and equality really come in, because it's important to remember that if we give everyone the exact same thing, expecting that we'll make people equal, it assumes that everyone started out in the same place. So here's an example. In this instance, we give everyone the exact same box, we treat them with equality, so that they can see over the fence. Well, that's great for the person on the left because they were already taller, but it's not so great for the person on the right who still can't see over the fence. From an equity perspective, we wouldn't want everyone to have the same size box because everyone isn't the same height to start out with. With an equity mindset, we would get everyone what they need to raise them up to the same level. Here's another example. With equality in mind, we can treat everyone the same and give them all the same bike, but that doesn't really help the person on the left who can't ride that kind of bike, or the person in the middle that is too small for that bike. So when we think about this situation with equity in mind, equity tells us that we need to give everybody a different kind of bike so they can all enjoy a bike ride. As you might guess, this is where the concept of fairness gets tricky for some folks. We often think that being fair means that everybody gets the same thing, and that's what we were taught when we were growing up. But fairness really only works when we're all the same to start out with. So this is a new idea for many of us to think about. There is this great American saying that people just need to work hard enough and pull themselves up by their own bootstraps. It's this idea that everyone can be successful if you just work hard enough. Well, that's a lot easier to do when some of us were born with longer arms to pull up those bootstraps, or maybe we were given longer bootstraps when we bought our boots. So let's think about moving away from the bootstrap idea and instead think about shoes. There is a quote by Nahid Dasani that goes, "Equality is giving everyone a shoe, but equity is giving everyone a shoe that fits."
All right. And so I really feel that this video can help students see, right, there is a difference between equity and equality, because a lot of times it gets confused in our culture as to, well, I need to give this to one person, so I need to give it to everybody. And so talking about the differences between equity and equality is really important because everybody has different needs, and those needs need to be met. But what I need, especially as a white male, could be very different than what our students need, majority of whom are not white males. And so talking about that difference between equity and equality and defining equity as what do you need is really important and really can help our students see those differences. That no, we're not designing everything for just for everybody to use, but these are being very specific based on the needs that our clients might have. Right? So this is where we get into this idea of, let's notice the problem. What is that problem? What are you seeing? So this is really, take a look at your environment, take a look around. What do you see? What's out there? Do you see something that is unfair to someone who may be in a wheelchair or using a walker or something like that? Have you heard people talking about this inequity? A lot of people come into spaces with maybe health inequities, where what is that equity? We can go even bigger with this and talk about global inequities, equity or inequities in race and gender. And what is that? What are you seeing? What are people talking about? If you look at something and say, this isn't for everybody, there are things that I'm able to do that maybe my kids aren't, because it's not for everybody. So what's out there that doesn't work for everybody, and how can we overcome those spaces? Do you experience something that not everyone has faced? There's different pieces within our culture and different things that really don't get talked about. And a lot of those tend to be medical inequities that really fall down. So is there something that you've seen, or is a barrier that could be something that could be addressed with the NEDC? And then we come back to this idea again of medical. Different people have different needs, and different people have different cultural values as well too. So, is there a inequity that your students can see as they're walking around that are not on their own culture or in their own family space or whatever that happens to be? So really, if we ask our students to pay attention to what they're seeing, kids see a lot, and sometimes they see things that we don't think that they'll see. And so where do you get that? So take a look around, and have students know that it's okay to ask questions as long as they're being respectful. But what do you see? Because they're going to bring a lot of things to the table that can be addressed, and they might share some personal information about themselves or members of their family that we didn't know about. And so, what are those things? And then, how can we use this to identify our problem? Right. So, one thing that we can do is talk about the inequities that we observe in this world. And so this is going to be put into the chat if you can click on. But I set up this Padlet to come in and take a look at, what are those inequities that you as teachers are seeing? Are there societal, systematic, health, opportunity, or just something else that's not even on this list? Because this is definitely not a comprehensive list. But this is something you can do with your students as well. And so this is something that I want to ask everybody in this session to do. Click on the link. Go in there and put down whatever you think of. There's 100% no judgment. This is all about brainstorming with us, and I see people are already doing it great. We're going to spend about 5 minutes to do this. So according to my clock, it's 1:31. So at 1:36, we'll have some conversations about this. So we're going to spend about another minute on this. Please make sure you take a look at the list. You can scroll up and down, as you can see me doing here, to take a look at what the things that don't quite fit on the screen. But this is a really good list. And as I look at this list, our list is very global in what we're talking about: affordable housing, community stereotypes, biases, language, systematic racism, access to technology, language preservation, environmental. And so we as adults, we tend to have a more sort of global view of things. And what I'd say is, ask your students not only just to talk about those global pieces, but also talk about maybe those more personal pieces. One of the things that I always like to throw into this space is that I am 45 years old, and for 42 years, I've lived with a chronic illness. And during my schooling and even during my life right now, I see that medical bias based on it just because my body doesn't work the same way as most people's do. So there's a bias that is personal to me that also could be part of, or an inequity that is personal to me, but also could be part of this discussion into, what about people who have chronic illnesses? What about, things you're seeing in your home? What about those pieces? And being able to share something like that is very powerful to students. They really are like, oh, wow, I didn't know that. And it can get into those discussions that you could have with people about, here's some different things that you may or may not know about someone and inequity that they're seeing. And it could be a hidden inequity. And so how do we draw that out? I mean, I'm an adult, I have no problem sharing that. But what about a student who's 13, 14, very self-conscious, and is really like, I don't want to share that because that makes me different. So how can we draw that out to build in some of those safe spaces? And these are things that, as we talk with our students, we tend to start off global and then start narrowing it down to something a little bit more personal, a little bit more, okay, this is something that maybe we can address instead of talking about, people not having enough food. Because while that's a huge problem and definitely something that we need to address, isn't something that 4 students on a team can really address through this project. And so being able to take those things and bring them down to say, all right, what can we do? How can we narrow this list down and still keeping these overarching things as important? So I don't know, I'm going to stop my share for just a second here. And I don't know if anybody has anything that they would like to add to this discussion before we move on. I'll take that as a no. To answer your question, can you use it in your MESA club? Absolutely. I 100% designed this to be used by teachers for your clubs. So as I said, I will share this presentation with everybody. There'll be a link at the end of the discussion to take this presentation and make it your own. So my goal is, my job is really teacher education and help facilitate MESA at your schools. So absolutely, please use this. If you feel like you need to modify it, absolutely go ahead. I have no problem with that. In fact, I encourage it, because what you do with your students may be different than what someone else does with theirs. In terms of moving students from global to personal, this is really based on relationships. You know, we really have, hopefully, and I know that this is really hard with COVID and doing things remotely, but hopefully we all have, you know, those personal connections with students, and really be able to talk about where we are with that and be able to ask those questions. And I know with COVID, it's a little bit more difficult because you don't really see them. You know, I know in a normal school year, we'd see our students every day, you know, some of those MESA students, and be able to really get to know them in a better way. In terms of COVID, it's just ask a lot of questions, share personal stories. You know, I shared my personal story in the journey with this. And so you share those personal stories. And obviously you don't have to go into great detail if you don't feel comfortable doing that, but sharing that personal story creates that personal connection. And really students need that, especially right now, because this time is difficult for everybody. So, you know, create those personal connections, share personal stories, talk about things. You know, if this was a classroom, I'd share my story. I'd share my brother's story who has some difficult. I share my mom's story, who is honestly, she's half robotic at this point because she's had so many surgeries. So there really is, you know, just create those personal connections, and you never know what's going to spark. So just creating that space where, hey, it's okay. Look, I'm human. I'm sharing where I am. Open that door, you know, and don't try to force it. Don't try to tell students, oh, you know, you have to share something, but definitely open that door. And when they feel comfortable, they're going to start sharing with that space.
Maybe I'll jump in here real quick too. So last year, for another event that we were a part of, we did an innovation activity, and which was a mobile app design, right? We're just asking students to think about creating a mobile app. But we started off with, what are things that frustrate you as students? What are things that you see as needs for teens, for students, right? You know, in Tucson, right, where we're located. Like, what are the things that you see or that you get frustrated with, or, you know, kind of, you know, ticks you off every day? And it was interesting to see the ideas that students came up with, and a lot of them came out around bus transportation to and from school, and having updates on if the bus is late, and when's the bus coming, and what are the different public transportation options. So if you just start off by creating small groups and asking students to have conversations about regular everyday frustrations or challenges, there's a lot of ideas that can come from that. And that really, because it's personal to them, right? And then you can go broader from that, because some of that becomes inequities, right? Our students face inequities for the fact that they can't drive yet, right? They might be limited by public transportation and other things within their spaces. And especially now, right? So many more frustrations are popping up because of us having to deal with this pandemic, that you might be surprised with what they come up with just from things they're experiencing every day.
Yeah, and the more personal you can get with them, it gives students feel power in that space. And a lot of our students feel the need to have power over something. And granted, I mean, they're all minors, so their power is limited, but giving them that opportunity to say, I have power in this space, is really gives them that chance to say, oh, now I can do more. Now I can do something about this. So, you know, give the students the power, let them be the ones to talk about this and share those spaces. All right, so I'm going to reshare my screen here. And so now we want to be able to empathize with this. You know, we've been noticing, we've been seeing things starting to narrow down. We've gone from that brainstorming session, starting to narrow down, all right, you know, how do we want to address this? And so we want to get the students to be able to empathize. We want them to be able to walk in the shoes of someone else. And so one of the things we have here is this MESA interview ideas, and the link is going to be popped into the chat. You will be asked to make a copy of this. And I do that as a former teacher who remembers sharing things and then they getting changed without not doing what I wanted to do. So this copy is yours. It'll take a minute. No. And this is by no means comprehensive. This is just here, and we know we're talking about with students, They may not have a plan. They may not know what to do. They may feel really uncomfortable about asking questions to someone. And so here's just kind of a quick checklist. Feel free to modify and do whatever you need to do based for your students. But really, one of the most important things is have a plan. Think about, all right, we're going to address an inequity of, a person in a wheelchair not being able to ride a bike. How are we going to do this? So think about what they want to discover. And it really is sort of just an open space, and try not to come in with preconceived notions. But where do we go, right? So we want to start with the general. Same thing like we were just talking about, where we want the person to feel at ease and more open to be able to go deeper into whatever it is they're going to talk about. So go in there and be prepared for something to be dynamic, because you can ask questions and all of a sudden someone will share something. You're like, wow, I had no idea. And that could become that inspiration for, all right, this is what we're going to do. And as they go into the interview, assign roles. And this could be really good also too for your students who may be English language learners who don't feel comfortable asking questions. It could be good for students who are shy or introverts and really don't feel comfortable asking a lot of questions there. So have one person asking the questions, but have other people taking notes, recording, whatever that happens to be, so that the whole team is hearing what your client or your user is saying, but also getting that feedback from only one person is in charge of that. So it doesn't feel overwhelming to whoever it is you're talking to, and make observations. What's their body language? I tend to talk with my hands, but if I get nervous, I tend to fold them and be like, okay, I can do this. So are they moving around a lot? Are some of the questions that they're asking, do they look uncomfortable with them? Because this might share something with them. And here at number 4, make the client feel comfortable. And I said that at the beginning, but this is so important because we want to make sure that they're uncomfortable with what it is. People aren't going to be willing to share as much as if they're not comfortable with this. And the rest of these, I'm not going to read through them except for that one at the end. You're going to be asking kids to go ask someone questions that may be personal. Make sure that they say thank you. That really goes a long way for the client to come back and say, oh yeah, that was really nice. I really feel like I was heard. I really feel like they're going to be doing something for me, and just having that positive things. And once again, we're dealing with teenagers. I have 3 of them living in my house right now, and that can be hard for teenagers to do right sometimes. But really just at the end, just saying, thank you for your time. We really appreciate it. We really appreciate you sitting down with us. It's really nice to be able to talk to you, and that really does make a huge difference. So now everybody has a copy of that, and this is yours. And please feel free to modify it and add anything else you might want to add into that, because there are other things that can go into these, and there's something that the kids might want to take care of.
Can I just jump in real quick, Phil, if I can?
Yeah.
So with the interviews, I know that might be really hard if students haven't done that before, and they might be really nervous. So I think you could use that. I think it'd be a really great way if you kind of set up a script or
My computer just froze.
and get them ready for talking with the client, because it might be really hard and intimidating for them to do that without having any kind of practice.
Can you hear me? Because my computer just froze, and then I don't know if I'm still online. Okay, I'm good. Thanks, Rudy. All right, so I'm going to reshare my screen here. All right. So once you have all that information, you can use an empathy map to kind of map out where they are. So if we click on this, once again, it'll force you to make a copy of it. And this is something that I borrowed from IBM. I've done a couple of their webinars, and I thought this was really great. So the first slide here is a just as an introduction and how to use this. And if you look at this at the second slide, it really is a great place for students to be able to take whatever information they came up with and put it into sort of a space where they can see it a little bit more visually. All these spaces are typable, so you can define your user, and then, all right, what were they saying? What were they thinking? How are they feeling in this space? Do they at some point, have talk about their emotions and say, oh, it's really frustrating, or I feel really angry, or it really just kind of depresses me when something like this happens? And what are they doing? What do they want to do? So this is a great tool to take that interview and all the notes that they have for their interview and put it into something usable that for them to use as they start doing their exploring and prototyping and things like that. And it's a really also nice way for them to remember that, hey, we're talking about a person, or we're talking about a couple of people. Here's that information for that person, and it's really just right in front where they've listed out, hey, here's our person. There's a name attached to it, and then what are their needs? What's something about them? Are they wheelchair bound? Do they have trouble walking? Do they have trouble breathing? Do they have whatever that happens to be?
It seems like people are getting their access denied for that one. I don't know if we just might need to change we can definitely change that after the session, but we'll change the permission so you can all access that.
And I'm sorry, I thought it was access to everybody. I guess I made a mistake when I did the link here. So definitely, and as I said, I will share this with everybody, and I'll make sure that when I share it, that all the links are permissible for anyone to just grab it and make a copy. And so then we want to start designing what they need. So what do they want or need? What experience do you want them to have? So if we're talking about, like the person in the wheelchair wanting to ride a bike, what do they want to do? What criteria and constraints do we want to work with? And this is something that students tend to struggle with. So, hey, we want to build them a $1,000 bicycle. Hey, how are you going to get the money to build that? I mean, that's a lot of work. So really really have them think about criteria and constraints. And what are the criteria and constraints from their user? Because the user may say, hey, I really like this idea, but I really don't want it to, go too fast or whatever it is. So really make sure that they're defining what are those criteria and constraints that they're working with, so that it really helps narrow their focus as they're starting to do their designing and prototyping. And this kind of makes me sad because the storyboard actually goes back to the same empathy map. So I will definitely make sure to update it, where they can actually take this and say, all right, what do you want your user to be able to do? So this beginning space is, where are they now? And then this ending space is, where do we want them to be able to be? And then what are those steps in between? So if we talk about like the bicycle, here's someone who wants to ride a bike who can't. Now, how are we going to get to the point where they're able to ride a bike? And the nice thing about this slide is that it is editable and it is copyable. So if they're like, we have 20 steps that we want our user to experience, great. Keep going with that storyboard. Because once again, this helps codify what they're trying to do and helps take them to wherever that end goal is that they're trying to reach. And the nice thing is that you can draw pictures in here. You can do whatever you want to do. And it doesn't have to be anything special. It just could be, all right, here's my person. I know my own kids make fun of me because my best art is stick art. And so, hey, if you're drawing stick figures on here, great. So all this has to do is make sense to the team. And it's not being shared with anybody. It's just the team saying, all right, we're at this first box. Hey, we finished that up. We got to the second box. Now we're going to the third one, wherever it is, to help them formulate and build a plan for where they're going. Because we all know that kids sometimes can get lost in whatever it is that they're doing and forget about what they're doing. And then, so, all right, here, look, this is what our plan was. We're on step 2. let's keep going with this. And I've got plenty of time. Excellent. All right. So next thing to talk about is where's our brainstorming? And we did some of this. We just did that whole where's our inequities here? Right? We can take that same idea and say, all right, what do we want our users to do? We just use Padlet to be able to do that, which is great for sticky notes. Padlet is great because it is free. You do have to create an account, but it's free for up to 3 creations of that. So the nice thing, though, is that once you're done with one, you can archive it, and then you're back to that number 3. So for this conference, I've made 2 of them, and I already had one from a previous training that I did. And I'm going to archive all of those, and then I'll be able to use it again for future trainings. Also with Padlet, you're able to take whatever brainstorming that they've done, create a PDF for it, and then you can share it with the students as well, so they can look back at that and say, oh yeah, we thought about that, but decided not to, or whatever that happens to be. A similar program is Lino. It is also free. You can sign up and do the same idea with this. It's not, I didn't like it as much as I like Padlet, so I'm not using it. However, you never know. Different people have different spaces with that. If you're a Google user, Jamboard is a great one. And you can load in your oh, I have a bunch of them. You can load in your Jamboards.
You can peek at the design heuristic ones there. That's live right now. They're doing that in another session.
Oh, that's right. You can see here they're doing the design. And the nice thing about this one is that you can add in more frames to that. Where if you're doing this remotely, all right, this is my idea, and then the next one, this is one of my teammates' idea, and things like that, and then you can bring them all back together. And so there's a lot of online tools to be able to do this brainstorming and to be able to have people talk and be able to put them down. Because one of the things that MESA is managing your notebook. Make sure you write your notebook, which can be a little bit difficult. We've heard from some of our schools here in Arizona that Google is not allowed to be used at all. It needs to be done in something else. And you have people typing over things and things can get erased. So this is another space where people can put stuff in that are all free, because I'm a firm believer in using free tools that you can use with your students to be able to start doing that idea generation. And then people can see what they're thinking of. You can see what they're thinking of. And it's great to be able to say, all right, we have a lot of ideas here. Now let's start taking this and narrowing it down a little bit. So after we ideate, we want to prototype. And I 100% recognize that doing prototyping in a virtual space is kind of crazy. So, you may have a team where you have one person who's like, oh, I love to build things. I want to build things. All right, there's their team builder. Give them a timeline and say, all right, you need to have this prototype built in a week or whatever that is. Maybe you have a virtual build room where they're all getting together onto something like Zoom, and everybody's saying, all right, this is what we want to do. One person's building, but everyone else is kind of following along. Or, hands-on activities. Everyone builds something, and then they can compare prototypes and get creative with that. And the nice thing is that the microcontrollers that we're asking people to use this year, the Circuit Playground and the Circuit Playground Express, and the Microbit all have virtual build spaces as well too, so people can see also that virtual piece with the coding. And if you're lucky enough to be able to do things in person, hey, you have everybody building, working together in that space as well too. But really, we recognize that prototyping right now is probably going to be the hardest part of doing this challenge. And so be creative with this. You may have brothers and sisters on the same team. Hey, maybe they can work together and build something and then get the feedback from the team as well too. Really, I think the sky's the limit, but definitely about what they want to do as you're moving forward. And then we test it, and we want to make sure that as we're testing it, that this testing also goes back to the user. So maybe they need to mail something, or maybe they need to, drop a package off at a front door and say, hey, can you please test this out and give us some feedback while maintaining social distance? But does it do what they want it to do? Make sure that they're recording any data. Is it reliable? Is it doing what you want it to do every time? But one of the things that we hear from our partner engineers is, hey, this is great that it worked once, but is it going to work another 500 times? So we want to make sure that it is working the way that they want it to. Is it doing the things? Is it working that same way every time? And does your user like it? What do they like? What don't they like? What does it need? Maybe you can get some video recording of them using it and giving feedback that way. And really record all that data. Really record, all right, what are we looking for this to do? And is it meeting those needs? And after going through the process of saying, we really want, this is what we're building, is it really doing all of that? And after we test, you want to make sure we reflect. And this needs to be honest reflection. I know that sometimes kids are like, oh, it worked great. And it really didn't. But, this is not something where this is a one-time deal. I always used to tell my students that if you did it right the first time, you did it wrong. It can always be improved. There's always something that can change. And if it worked 100% of the time, the first time, you got incredibly lucky, but it probably can still be improved. This is why right now, we're on iPhone like X2, X3, because they keep reiterating it and saying, oh, we want to improve this access. We want to improve that piece. And we look at a lot of things like Windows or iOS or Android or just whatever. There's always that improvement that they do from year to year. So how can we improve this? And once again, because you're working with a person, you want to make sure that that person's input is in there. So that they say, hey, this worked great for half of the things that I wanted to do, but it didn't really work for these other things. Okay, so how can we keep what worked and change what didn't work? And sometimes kids get upset. They're like, oh, this doesn't work. I can't do this anymore. Oh, I'm terrible. It's like, no. Find what worked. Celebrate the positive and fix that negative. And I always like to say that failure is only a stop on the journey to success, because the people who fail have turned that into something that worked. So, impart that to your students. Hey, what worked? It was great. Now let's build on that and go from the things that didn't work quite the way that you wanted it to. Right. And then the question is, what do we do next? What's next in this? Well, hey, look where we are. We're back at the beginning again. Want them to notice, did their prototype actually do what we wanted it to do? Did it start taking that inequity that they were seeing and start to reduce it or eliminate it? If it did, great. If it didn't, how are you going to change it? If it did, hey, guess what? Did it 100% meet the criteria that you need to do? And the answer is probably no. Keep going. Go back through this cycle. Reiterate it. And then when we get to your MESA days, or whoever we happen to see at nationals, we know that they've gone through this process and have re-noticed that and gone through this process a couple of times. Okay, so I am going to stop my screen share here. Right. And really, this is a tool that we put together here in Arizona that we wanted to make sure that we share with everyone. And I'm going to fix the links and make sure that it gets out to you sooner rather than later, because this is a tool to be able to take to your students and say, all right, we're in this process. Let's work our way through it. And now, hopefully, you're more competitive, and hopefully win your MESA day and then move on to the national competition. Because really, we want the students to be able to be successful in whatever it is that they do, and giving them the tools to be able to do that is, our main goal. And so at this point, I want to open it up to any questions or any comments or really anything, because sometimes I get excited and talk fast, and I realize we still have 10 minutes left in this session.
Do you have any suggestions on a virtual building room? Because I just Googled it, and all I'm getting are people who are wanting to plan a house.
Unfortunately, I haven't found one that works for students, because I've done the same thing that you've done. And, so one of the things that I would say is, use something like maybe like Tinkercad, which is a free CAD software, Onshape, which is also a free CAD software, and it's free for educators as well too. And then you can invite your students to that, and then they can design things there. Tinkercad it's block based, based on geometric shapes, and it also has an Arduino virtual build environment as well too. So if you're using Arduino, that might be a nice thing to be able to use as part of your design. Onshape is a little bit more math intense, but also things like the Google one, SketchUp. Thank you.
Gotcha.
Yeah. And then you could actually do like a Zoom meeting where you have kids together, and then whoever your builder is building it, and the other students are watching and talking and being part of that space. So really, I think being creative in that space, but in terms of virtual, really it's kind of difficult in the space. So that's why I'd say maybe something like Tinkercad or Onshape or SketchUp would be a good one.
We have that question in the chat about middle schoolers learning to how to use beginning coding software like Scratch. I think Microsoft Make Code is a great space, especially for NEDC, because you can learn both the microbit and Arduino in that Microsoft Make Code, and they've got a simulator there, so they can code and then see how it would react on the microbit or the Arduino right there. Live and online. So that's a really great space right now while you're still in virtual classroom.
And another nice thing about the Make Code is that there are tutorials in the site. So if you go to the Circuit Playground or the microbit and scroll down a little bit on the main page there are tutorials for it. So you can say, all right, let's start at the very beginning. Here we go. Watch this video, do this activity, because they do make them interactive activities, and then they start getting the feel for the program, and the feel for how the coding works. And the nice thing is that since it's block based, they just have to drag and drop. But there's also the code itself. They can just click a button and they'll be able to see all of the code as well too. So are there any other questions or comments? Good jokes?
Is this the first year for Design for Equity? What was last year's competition?
It is the first year for Design for Equity. Last year was Arduino Solutions for Humans.
That's right. Okay. Do you guys have any, is that on some the USA's website to see what students, did they still submit? What happened were they able to submit last year?
Unfortunately, no.
Okay.
But that competition was 3 years, for 3 years. And before in the 2018-2019 school year, Arizona hosted the national competition. And so on our YouTube channel, we do have the pitches for all of those videos, or for all of the teams who came to nationals. And a lot of the things from this year's specs relate to those specs. Well, and it's not 100% the same. So don't say, oh, this is what you need to do, because there are definite changes from that. But you can definitely go check out those pitch videos, and you can see a lot of the pitches from there.
Okay.
Oh, and Jason just put into the chat Autodesk Inventor, which is another great program, and it's also another free program for educators. And Manny popped into the chat a link to copy my presentation. And I will be, after the session is over, be making sure those links are accessible for everyone so that, we don't run into that don't have permission space.
And one of the cool things I think about the last NETC that we had in person here in Arizona was there were many of those projects that would be easily be able to transition into this year's competition. They were all human centered, and which is kind of where we start with inequities, right? We got to focus on humans, and so many of those projects did focus on inequities, whether it was students that designed for a blind classmate or students that were designing for students with text anxiety. So they were already kind of touching those areas. So those videos, those pitches could be a great place to start to share with students what's capable, what's possible, right? Because it has already been done. And I'm finding the links to those pitches and posting them in the chat.
Yeah. Janice Patel, are you referring to Fusion 360? Okay. One of the things that Autodesk is doing is making it so that you can use those software like this for free. So actually right now they did change Fusion 360 where you can get a free copy of it. I don't know if in the future there's going to be a subscription service, but I know that right now it is free. Manny, did you already put the link to the survey into the feedback?
I did.
Okay.
I can grab it again because it probably got lost in all the other stuff that's good.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Yeah. So, I hope that this tool is useful to everybody. And I hope that you got something out of the session. So please make sure you fill out the survey. And if you want to say nice things about me, I would appreciate that as well too, but no pressure. So I really appreciate you spending your Saturday with us. We do have the closing sessions, and then we'll be done. So thank you very much, everyone, for spending your time here with us today. And I hope you have a good rest of the day.